Episode 33 of the Geekdom101 podcast was a really interesting one and kind of a sequel to episode 32 in a way, where I had Roberto Blake talk about self-employment. This episode came out February 12th, 2020. So again, before the global pandemic really got serious and the lockdowns really got crazy. And I was joined by DJ Flash, aka Stevie J from OHHLA, the original hip hop lyrics archive, MMA Mania, RapReviews, AngryMarks, and MrMegaManFan on YouTube. And he was here because, and I've talked about this before, and Roberto and I talked about it, it's never been easier to make a living online than it is in the 2010s and now 2020s. There's so many opportunities out there if you're willing to work for it. But Mr. Flash here made himself a living, bought a home, bought a car, was able to make a really good income in the 90s online before the internet really became what it was. So on this episode, we discussed the crazy life he's had as a businessman, as a self-employed individual from 1992 until today, and how to make a living from the internet before any of us did. He predates all of us when it comes to, like me, Roberto, guys of our age. He's a little bit older than we are. And there's some really fun stories here. Like he goes through like what it was like to get his first paycheck and how shocking it was. And it was a really fun time with Stevie J. Somebody who actually started me in the game. I always wanted to do radio. And before I even did YouTube, I was on his podcast back in 2008 as the co-host on the AngryMarks Pro Wrestling podcast. This was a long time ago, and I was able to get my feet wet. So a lot of people will sit there and say that, you ever heard the phrase like, it took 10 years before I became an overnight success? That's pretty much what it was. Like it took years of working before I finally found something that worked. And Stevie was there for a lot of it. So, but it's really about him. This is about him and his life. So let's go ahead and go to episode 33 from February 12th, 2020, here on the Geekdom101 podcast. And welcome back to the Geekdom101 podcast. Joining me today, someone with many, many names and many, many hats when it comes to the world of online e-biz or content creation for many, many years. He goes by Flash. He goes by Stevie J. There's so many names. What name do I call you for this show? MrMegaManFan?
I suppose you could, but just plain Steve works too. But so many people call me Stevie J, I'm used to it by now. Right.
Well, we have here Stevie J from so many different projects throughout the years, from the original hip hop lyrics archive, RapReviews, AngryMarks.com. You write for MMA. Is it MMA Junkie or MMA Fighting?
MMA Mania, although it's a sister site of MMA Fighting.
MMA Mania, that's right. I knew I was missing one. And you do podcasts, you do YouTube. You've kind of just been hustling on the web for, is it now?
My entire life, literally.
Yeah, like 3 decades, right?
Yeah, because I broke in before there was even a web browser, back when it was all just news groups and emails and text. There was not even graphics on the internet back then.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about this because when I interview creators, a lot of them are younger than us and a lot of them are around the same age as us and a lot of them are entrepreneurs and things like that. The reason why I had you on, not just because you have a lot of things in common with me and you have a great history, but a reason why I wanted to have you on is because you do have stories and situations that people didn't have no idea about because it happened so long ago, before this current era of the web. But also, you were one of the first guys that, when you were one of the first, there wasn't that many in the 90s who actually was able to build a business and do what a lot of people nowadays are trying to do with YouTube and Twitch, and that is purchase a home, you're not a billionaire by any means, but you live a life where you have less debt than other people. And I think a lot of people are trying to do that now with content creation. And take it from me, because I started this with you, and we're gonna get to that here in a minute. And it took me, from 2008 to 2015, that's what, 7 years. It took me 7 years of doing podcasts, not just for your website, but stuff with you and this stuff on my own. It took 7 years before I was able to actually make a profit at all doing this, and sometimes it takes a long time. And sometimes, like with your story, you have your peaks and valleys. Like you had, a good, then some bad, then some good, then some bad. And that's life. But it's just a great story. And I'm looking forward to diving into it.
And like I told you off the air, I feel like in many ways your career mirrored mine, because it took me 7 years from 1992 to 1999 before I ever made a single dime in anything I did on the internet.
And that's crazy. I actually didn't know it was actually 7 years. That is kind of, I want to give you a big hug right now because that makes me feel a lot better. It makes me feel good about it. Yeah, I mean, and you were there, and I do publicly thank you for what you've done. I know you at one time you never thought you'd hear me say this, but I do thank you for what you did for me in 2008, because even though what we did, I mean, I didn't make any money on it or anything. That wasn't the point. We had fun. And for those who don't know, let me clarify, because people who probably wonder what the hell we're talking about. So before YouTube, I did, and this is some folks listening know about this, some don't. I did my own podcast called Big D and the Super Friends. But before that, and that was actually part of Stevie's AngryMarks website. Before that, I was on his podcast. We had met at WrestleMania 24. I realized who you were, or you told me, it was a good time. And then you invited me to be your co-host for the AngryMarks podcast. And I think it was April 2008 we started. And you, without realizing it, you kind of gave me a lot of training and seasoning. Like, you weren't actually training me, but we were doing these shows together. And like, you weren't training me, but we were doing, but I was getting experience, doing live shows. Before YouTube streaming and Twitch, Blog Talk Radio and AngryMarks was doing all this stuff. Like, and then everybody else hopped on board. Then the wrestlers actually started doing their own podcast. But for a while, right, it was years. It was like from 08, 09, 2010, 2011 when Super Friends ended. That's 4 years of good training of doing a live show, sometimes 2 live shows a week. And it was... I appreciate it. Even though you didn't realize it, and neither did I, it did make me, it made me a better talker, if that makes sense. In other words, you were like NXT. How about that? I'm not trying to say, not in a negative way.
No, that's all right. I mean, it's
class.
Not a negative, because I actually feel like I am a developmental system, because a lot of the writers who wrote for RapReviews went on to work for publications like Vibe, The Source, Rolling Stone. It's like, I get people started. That's kind of my thing.
And do you even know that you get them started? In other words, are there people who you have found throughout the years that you say, okay, this guy could eventually be something, besides me, of course?
I don't ever plan it that way. I put out feelers for talent, and I'm like, hey, if you want an opportunity, I can give you a place to create, and if you enjoy it, go ahead and do it, and if it's not your thing, you can move on and do something else. I try to give people a platform.
It's crazy too, because it's been so long, but it does feel like yesterday, and my life has gone through so many changes since then. We all have, MMA Mania, which is where people can find your articles on all the fights that you cover. You'll go to the shows and cover the fights live, and then just do your articles and columns and whatnot. That wasn't even around in 2008. So if you were to have done something like this, it would have been exclusively for your site.
Actually, the funny thing is, it was around then. It just wasn't called that. It was originally called UFC Mania, and they got a big cease and desist from Zuffa saying, you can't call your site UFC Mania. You aren't you don't have the license to that trademark, and you're not allowed to refer to yourself as that. So they changed it to MMA Mania back in 2008.
Yeah, that I didn't even know that, and it was in 08 of all years. That's a pivotal year for this whole thing. No, I actually had no idea, but that makes sense because, remember they cracked down on bootleggers at one time. I don't think they care anymore, but at one time the UFC really cared about that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, because they weren't licensed to ESPN and had hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank from being bought out. They had to hustle and scrabble just like you and I did, except of course on a much larger scale. So they were going after everybody back then. They were like, you can't use our stream, you can't use our content, you can't use our name, you can't use anything. They were hammering.
Do you remember, this is a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit, but do you remember back in the day, you could watch pay-per-views on Justin.tv. Do you remember Justin.tv?
Yeah, I remember a lot of people watching UFC on Justin TV.
And WWE.
Oh, yeah, all the pay-per-views, because that was before the WWE Network, so people would just go and log on Justin TV and just stream that shit, and WWE was constantly like, it was whack-a-mole. They were like, okay, here's a stream, shut it down, and then another one pop up, here's a stream, shut it down, and everybody would just start a new stream whenever the old one got whacked.
I know, and it was just, we had to keep changing streams, and it was, and the thing that people don't understand is, it's not like the kids back then, and I'm gonna refer to us as kids, even though we weren't kids back then. Still, we were younger, but we weren't kids. It's not like we were trying to take money away from the company. A lot of us were broke. All right, like I was broke for a while. All right, you knew me when I was broke, when I was homeless. You're one of the few people that actually experienced. I mean, you weren't here, but you experienced my homelessness in '09 because I had to stop doing the show for 6 months because I couldn't find a place to record, if you remember. And then you sent me a bag filled with like pretzels. And do you remember that?
Yeah, my wife and I put together a care package with like ramen noodles and snacks and all sorts of things and mailed it to you because it was the only thing we could do. We couldn't go to Florida and do anything, so we tried to do the next best thing.
You could have given me some of that money, but I mean, that's...
Oh no! By 2009, my money was starting to go in the toilet, so it took a long time for me to bounce back from that.
I do want to ask you about that because that could be a good. I want to talk about that because people who were trying to do, the content creator thing, that could be an issue in the future. We got to talk about that. But no, you remember all that. And so that's the thing. We were broke. I mean, pay-per-views were $40 a month, $39.95. And before they started off being $25, which actually wouldn't have been so bad. Actually $20 in some markets. But then, by the time 07, 08 came around, it was $40. And actually went up to $50 at one point. And
that's when I was going to the bar to watch them. Like,
me too.
Me too. I didn't order that shit. I was like, I'm going to there's a place here called DJ's Dugout. Every month they'd have WWE, and that place would be wall to wall packed with all the people who didn't want to buy the pay-per-view.
Yeah, and you could order wings and sandwiches, and no, I did the same thing, dude. When we talked about that, but except I was at the press box in South Tampa where I saw with my own eyes Kofi Kingston, Seth Rollins, the Usos, all these dudes that are on TV now would go to
were all in FCW at the time.
Exactly, and the press box in South Tampa was like maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from FCW at most, with or without traffic. So they would all come up, every one of them. You would think that they would get the shows at home or in their hotels, but they were also broke because developmental guys don't make that much money, especially back then. But yeah, dude, I sat next to like Ryback and Jake Hager, the undefeated Jake Hager, all these dudes, man. And it was Alicia Fox. I could tell you so many stories. I probably did back then. I don't even remember.
Well, the indie wrestlers here would do the same thing. Like, I'd be at DJ's Dugout, and table over from me would be, and this is not a name you'll know, but it's a guy I know well, Jason Strife. He's like the local X Division wrestler who's been on WWE shows, like doing when they have the local talent,
Right. Yeah, we have a few of those too. Steve Bradley's one of our guys.
And what's funny is I'd be sitting next to him and I'd be hearing him tell gossip about Ian Rotten, and I'm like, oh, I can't put this on my podcast. I'd love to, but I can't because I know he doesn't know he's being heard by somebody who covers this right now.
Right. Well, the journalistic respect thing, but it's funny because I remember AngryMarks I remember that whole. I remember I hated one of our disputes. I remember was that we had, which wasn't really a major dispute, was over IWA Mid-South because that whole incident had happened with Mickey Knuckles and that weird wrestler that was like in drag or whatever, where Ian Rotten had hit him with a jug of water and said, "Learn to sell." Oh my God, that incident. That was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. I remember Cotrera was really mad, and I remember you interviewed somebody from IWA Mid-South, and I was like, Stevie, don't give them any publicity. I remember I was like mad. I was like, don't give them any pub. Don't pay for their freaking fuck Ian Rotten. I was mad. I was pissed, bro. But I mean, you can see why though, right? Like that shit was a little too much if you ask me. I've never been a fan of that style of wrestling.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always two sides of that fence because I've been on the one side, like you said, with covering IWA Mid-South, where maybe it wasn't the best time in the promotion's history. And then I've been on the other side of the fence where I've been like, okay, I'm going to reach out to this guy, this indie wrestler from Memphis, because he seems like an interesting person to talk to. And before the interview even took place, and I'm not going to name names, so you're going to just have to look it up for yourself, it came out that he had been involved in some child pornography.
Oh boy.
And so my co-hosts immediately shut it down. You weren't on the show at the time, but both of my co-hosts were like, we're not having this guy on. And I had to actually, hat in hand, go to him and apologize and say, we can't do this interview. I'm really sorry. There's just some things that we can't talk about on the air. And he was like, no problem. I understand.
Was this the guy from Florida?
No, this was a guy from Memphis.
Okay, so it's not who I'm thinking of then. It's not the guy who got busted with a 14-year-old girl. You know who I'm talking about.
No,
okay.
Not that guy, no.
Okay, because Kenny Omega was very, very upset about that a couple years ago. It's just fun talking to you right now and reminiscing on those days. I remember, the other day on the KLB group, somebody posted like the top 10 deadliest botches in wrestling, and the Champagne Marty Garner pedigree was on there, and I thought about the interview. I thought about the interview with Champagne on AngryMarks. How he pretty much told. Remember, he's like, "Oh no, I did that on purpose. I was fine." Like he pretty much told us on the air that no, I did not break my neck. I was not paralyzed. I'm fine. And then, and people still to this day think that he actually died because that Triple H killed a man in the ring. Mm-hmm. Thanks, YouTube clickbait.
I honestly, the reason I even had him on the show was because at the time the O Show was part of AngryMarks, and they had him on like every other week. They always wanted to get a glass of champagne, as they called it. So I heard him so many times on their show. I was like, I gotta have this guy on mine. He knows so many stories about the Hardys, about Shane Helms, about that entire North Carolina scene. Yeah, the Omega scene. I had to hear all his war stories for myself.
Well, I loved that show, and I remember during that show, a long-standing Cold War began between you and Headcase because Champagne starts rapping, and then you're like, we got rappers in the chat room who couldn't fuck with that. And I remember Headcase was like, is he talking about me?
That was never meant to him. I don't know why he got that.
Well, he was the only rapper in the chat room, though. I mean, I remember. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think Ciara was a rapper.
No, but I was just saying it as a way of, like, making a transition to, like, how skilled he was. Like, yo, nobody can fuck with Champagne right now. You know, it wasn't meant to anybody in the chat room specifically. It was just a generalized comment, and he took it so personal. And I even apologized to him, and he didn't want to hear it.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's all water under the bridge anyways, but I just remember that being a thing back then. You know, it took Headcase about 10 years since I knew him back in 2005, but he did put out his album, and I don't know if you ever heard it, but I gotta be honest, it was actually really good. Like, I was stunned because, you know, Headcase had become like a running joke on the AngryMarks shows, not just yours, but also mine, because, you know, and I love Headcase, but I mean, it was easy to make fun of, you know, donuts for breakfast and all that. But the dude spit some fire on his album, man. He even played guitar on it, like his own, like a Kid Rock type thing. And I'm telling you, yo, when I listened to it, it's actually the last hip hop album that I listened to in full, with the exception of like, there's a few like Most Def stuff. There's a few that I heard, you know, but that was the last one I actually like really was excited for. And it wound up being pretty good. Like, really.
No, I don't dispute that at all. I mean, I always thought Headcase was talented. I just also, like you said, it was one of those situations like, is he ever going to actually get around to doing it? Because he's great, but he's got to actually do it.
Yeah, we kept teasing him about it because he would always talk about next year, and he never did it. But he finally did it. So, and I'm still waiting for the follow-up, Headcase. Let's talk about hip-hop is where you started. So let's go back. All right, we're going to go back now. You started a newsletter, right? Mm-hmm. Hardcore. Yeah. Now, before we talk about hardcore, are you surprised I remembered that?
No, not at all.
Okay, never mind. The ego. No. No, but okay. You went to college in Michigan, right?
No.
Okay, I fucked up
I
already.
moved to Michigan after college. No, I started.
Iowa.
Yeah, I started out at a very
backwards.
tiny college in northwest Iowa called Buena Vista. And this is how, no offense to the people who live there, it's so podunk that they don't even understand it's Buena. Because
That's hilarious. They purposely mispronounce it?
Right. I had to do Jerry Lewis Labor Day telethon, like calling people for donations, and if I said I was calling from Buena Vista, they'd hang up on me. I had to say Buena Vista wrong, or they'd hang up on me.
That's absurd. That's actually absurd. Like that's like, and was this like, okay? Because I've never been to the Central States. I've been to Illinois, but I've never been to like Nebraska, Ohio, like. Is it like podunk, like you said, like people with one tooth and shit, or is that just a stereotype?
Well, no, it wasn't like toothless hillbillies or anything, but
right.
it was a very, there's no other way to say it other than it was very white. Like, there were 3 black students on the entire campus, and I knew them all.
Now, it's funny, because I knew all 3 people. You did not grow up in New York. You did not grow up in L.A., you didn't grow up in Houston, you know, you were kind of in the middle of the country. How did you first discover hip hop? What was I think you told me the story off the air, but I don't think you've ever told it on the air with me. How did you first unless you remember that hip hop classic show I did the last 2 episodes, but let's talk about it again. How did you first discover hip hop, and how did your love for it grow? Because you were into it even before the mid 90s, like you were into it even before that.
Yeah, early 80s, because this is going to sound absolutely crazy, but I swear this is how it happened. My parents gave both my sister and I an Easter basket, you know, filled with chocolate and jelly beans and little eggs that you put stuff inside of, you know, the plastic eggshells. And then they put a tape in each one of our baskets. And my sister got a tape called Breakdance, and I got like either the Police or Men at Work or whatever. And I heard her tape and I liked it so much better. I was like, I'll trade you. And she gave me her breakdance tape. And that was my introduction to hip hop, because the very first track on that breakdance tape was The Adventures of Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel. So when people call me Flash, it's because of that song. Like, when I developed the hip hop persona, it was Flash because of Grandmaster Flash. It was my tribute to him.
And it's before this is like before Eric B. and Rakim. This is before Run DMC. They were right around the corner, but that was like the early days. So but it's crazy that like you got that tape. Like, I know that he had gotten like, you know, nationwide syndication because the song he was such a big rapper at the time. But
not rapper, producer.
Producer. I'm
DJ,
sorry.
Yeah.
No, well,
right.
The Furious Five.
But it was. Yeah, he was part of the whole Melly Mel Furious Five.
Yeah, Melly Mel was the MC. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and then as time went by, were you actually thinking about becoming a breakdancer?
Yeah, I was the worst white breakdancer you ever saw, but believe me, I was out there doing it. I was doing pop locking and head spins, and
I can't believe it.
No, you can, because I was terrible. I was awkward and uncoordinated, the worst white boy dancer ever. But it didn't matter because nobody else was doing it where I lived, so I could be terrible and it was okay because there was no measure of comparison. Like, I was literally the only one doing it.
That is absurd. So when you went to college, what was your major? What in other words, what did you want to be when you grew up back then?
Oh, I wanted to be a programmer. I was a computer nerd from the very beginning. Like, I programmed on a Commodore VIC-20 growing up. That was how I learned BASIC and how I learned computer language. And I thought that was going to be my life. I was going to be like this undercover, secret, hip-hop loving nerd who was a computer programmer by day and breakdancing by night. That's what I thought my life was going to be. And so when I went to college, I got into a computer science program, did it for a couple of years, and then I hated being in Storm Lake. Again, no offense to the people who lived there, but I was like, this town ain't for me. I can't, there's no scene here. There's nobody here I can relate to except for the 3 black kids on campus. You know, it's like, I got no future here. I get like, it got to the point where I would write editorials for the student newspaper, and I would get calls from legitimate rednecks threatening to kill me because I suggested that country fans should listen to rap music and rap fans should listen to country music. Now we're living in the era where Lil Nas X does songs with Billy Ray Cyrus, but back in the early 90s, if you suggested that idea to people, they wanted to lynch you. And I was like, fuck this. This town ain't for me. I transferred from BV to Iowa State, and once I got there, I reinvented it. I was like, okay, I don't want to be in front of a computer for the rest of my life. What else can I do? I love to write. I've been doing this hip-hop newsletter. Why don't I just take that and run with it and get into journalism? And so I changed career tracks, and I changed my degree and got a journalism degree.
Okay, so you do have a journal degree. Then that means you have credibility with our boy Double G, because you got to have a journal degree to have credibility with him. That's an inside joke that you and I and maybe two other people will get. So he finally made it to Dave. Ain't that something? It's funny how life is, isn't it? But what was I going to tell you? What's interesting about that, though, is that you love computers and hip-hop, and that's kind of where you made, I don't want to say your first fortune, but I guess the first decade of your career is those two things, right?
It was just a natural for me to combine the two. It was like I was posting on internet news groups, and there was a group called Alt-Rap at the time, and that's how the hardcore newsletter got started, because remember, MC Surge had that line in Pop Goes the Weasel where he said, we should have started RAPE, Rappers Against Phony Entertainers. And I took that and I kind of ran with it, and I was like, well, what if we should have started CORE, Committee of Rap Excellence? And I said that, and I didn't think anybody would think anything of it. And then I got all these emails in my inbox, which actually was my sister's email account at the time because I was logging on through her before I even got to college. And then she was like, no, you're getting too many emails about this Committee of Rap Excellence. I'm getting you your own email account. So I had email before I even got to college. And it was because of that one message on Alt-Rap that I started the newsletter. I was like, okay, everybody wants to be in a Committee of Rap Excellence, but what does that committee do? And then we had a newsletter because we needed something to do with it.
Right. And with the newsletter, it's like Meltzer here, but not. With the news, you were just kind of talking about albums that were coming out and things like that, like and stuff that you like, reviews. You basically, the earliest rap reviews were in the hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it started, was the first rap reviews that we did before RapReviews.com was a thing, and getting all sorts of, like there was this guy, Charles Isbell, the homeboy from hell, as he was known on the news groups back then, and he would do these votes every year where people would vote for the best and worst of rap, and we would publish the results in the newsletter, and it was just editorials and reviews and informational pieces and anything people wanted to contribute. Like, if it's hip-hop related, we'll put it in the newsletter.
That's great. Now, so this would have been, what, 92, 93?
Yeah, that was when it got started, was the early 90s, 92, 93.
So you would have had to have, this is before, like we talked about before we started recording, or actually earlier, before there was even a web browser, because this is like the news group Prodigy era that we're talking about here. Now, so your email account, see, back in those days, email accounts actually had limits. So, because you know, nowadays Google gives you like 15 gigs, which is impossible to fill up with just, email unless you're getting lots of photos and video and stuff like that. Back then, there was no way you could email a photo or a video, bro. It's impossible. It was just text. Did you have to do the Meltzer thing and print out the emails to keep them?
Oh, yes, I did. I went to the lab at BV, and they had one of those form feeder printers with the punched holes on the side.
Oh, my God. Dot matrix?
Yes, and I would print out reams and reams of emails and rip it off the printer and take this giant stack of emails that I'd printed off back to my room.
So, wow, it's just the technology. It was so cool back then, the age of discovery, and nowadays that stuff is like just a fossil. It's like you know what I mean? That kind of stuff is like antique.
I know. It's funny when I think back of all the things that we went through with technology, but I kind of feel that way about my wife's late grandmother. It's like, look at what she saw in her lifetime. Like, she went from before there were even transistor radios to black and white television to Dolby surround sound to man on the moon to cell phones in your pocket to a high definition TV on her wall in her home. You know, it's like all the different technologies she's seen that she never could have imagined or thought of. It's the same way with us in the internet. It's like, wow, now we have the entire internet in our pocket, and who would have ever thought of that 30 years ago?
Exactly. It really is a mind fuck. It really is. So when you graduated from Iowa State, got your journal degree, how did you begin? RapReviews came before OHHLA? I remember them both existing when I discovered them.
No, it was the other way around. See, at the same time, I loved breakdancing and I loved writing. That made hip-hop lyrics unnatural for me because I was a person who was very interested in the word. I was always writing poetry, short stories, you name it. That was just my thing. So the lyricism of hip-hop was a huge draw for me because, as I even explained it to my high school English teacher, I'm like, the density of a hip-hop song compared to R&B or rock and roll is so much greater because they can fit so many more words into a measure of a song than a singer can. And I was in love with words, so I would write them down. My friends and I would sit there in the computer lab and write down our favorite rap songs by Kool Moe Dee, by LL Cool J, by Ice-T, by NWA. We would just write down the lyrics ourselves. And when I got to college, I was like, you know what? I see people post these all on news groups all the time, but nobody ever saves them and curates them and organizes them in one place. So I'm going to do that. And it was before there was even an OHHLA, there was a Gopher web archive, which I don't think people understand what Gopher is, but
I don't think I even know what that is. And I'm a tech guy.
Yeah, it was the web before the web. It was a way that universities and institutions could connect to each other and have an open database that anybody could pull files into or out of. So I created a Gopher archive with all of the lyrics that I had either written myself or had gathered from the news groups and put them all in one place. And then over time, that expanded and grew and became its own website, which eventually I bought the domain name because all these other people were copying this idea that I'd had to create a lyric repository. So I called it the Original Hip Hop Lyrics Archive because, like you said, I was the first one doing it. So I'm like, I'm going to call it original because nobody had the idea before I did.
Right, and then we have Rap Genius coming along and doing what you did, except, now it's just got to call what, Genius? They do more than rap now?
Yeah, they switched from Rap Genius to Genius, but their entire archive was basically lifting all the stuff that me and my contributors had done over a couple of decades, and that was how they started their site.
I mean, it was, but at the same time, one thing I'll give them credit for sure is that they had the whole thing where I explained what the lyrics meant. And that was really cool because I remember, not to segue into my story, but I was
Can I interject real quick though?
Yeah, go for it.
The reason they did that was search engine optimization because every annotated link they could put in a lyric increased the number of references they got on Google.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, that was a total SEO move on their part. They wanted to get all the traffic that was going to OHHLA to their site. So by increasing the density of searches on their website, they managed to get all the traffic redirected to them.
But it was still a good idea to explain the lyrics because, like, when I was doing the opinion stuff, from 2002 to around 2010, I think it was, I was doing these, like, reviews where I would sometimes break down what these lyrics meant. I couldn't do it lyric by lyric. I mean, I could, but not very often because it would just eat up too much space on the page. But they did it, and I thought that was a good idea. I mean, you know what it reminds me of? And no, it's gonna sound weird, but do you remember on Super Friends? Remember M. Merritt? Do you remember him? One of my co-hosts. So his dad, this is very similar to you in that his dad had this chauffeur limo business throughout the 90s, and that's how they made their money. Chauffeur limo business, even up until when we started doing our stuff on your website and stuff like that, and so he had this like set of customers. He would go pick them up in a Lincoln Town car and drive them all over town. Then Uber came around. When Uber came around, it really, really hurt his business. I'm not sure if actually, because I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, I'm not sure if his dad actually went out of business or if his dad just lowered his prices, but it's just one of those things where, like, you have this cool idea, and then somebody else comes around with maybe more resources or just, a different idea and just kind of takes it, and then you're kind of like, well, damn, like, what am I supposed to do now, But before Rap Genius, you had been carrying the torch for 15 years? Is that safe to say?
I think so, from like 93 to the late 2000s to whenever Genius started. And not to say I'll give them that credit like you did, that it wasn't a genius move, pun intended.
Are you salty at them? Be honest. Are you salty?
I'm a little, yeah, but let me just be, I'll give them some credit that, annotating the lyrics obviously worked for them. But it would have been nice if they had at least acknowledged where they got it from, like instead of just acting like they invented it from whole cloth, because people were sending me links to their pages like, yo, they copied everything. They even copied the errors. Like,
yes. They even copied your typos.
Right, and people would start purposely putting typos in the lyrics they submitted to me just to see if they would show up on Rap Genius, and they did every single time. It's like, you know what, you could at least acknowledge that's where you're getting it from. Even if you're doing what we did and doing it better, you could acknowledge it. But I give them the credit for annotating it because a lot of people wanted that information. It was just a philosophical difference in the way I viewed the way that lyrics were supposed to be. I didn't think you should be able to like click on the lyric and have it explained for you. I thought you should be able to like learn from the hip hop artists themselves, like listen to their words, listen to what they're saying.
Shame on you for thinking people are smart enough to do that.
No, I figured people would learn from context. Like, enough times, if you hear E40 use a certain term over and over again, eventually it's going to dawn on you what he's talking about. It's like you pick it up contextually from the rest of the things he's saying.
Yeah, but sometimes you got guys like Ghostface who say things that I still am trying to figure out to this day. You know what I...
but see, that was part of the fun. When you talk about his Wallies and his Clarks, it's like I had to do the research and like, oh, I get it. He's talking about shoes. It's like that's the fun of it is learning about Wallabies, because nobody was rocking Wallabies where I lived.
Well, right, and I also loved how I was big into we talked about this before. I was big into the East Coast hip hop scene, and I loved like the Nas, Cormega, AZ style, because they had, certain words that only exist in the Queensbridge area. Yo, what's up, Dun? Like, Mob Deep. You had
the Dun's language, the whole 41st side of QB type of style.
Yeah, and that was always fun to kind of unravel too. Like, I agree with you, and I had more fun figuring things out. And that's one thing I do miss about hip hop from those days, from the 90s and the 2000s. It's still out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to turn this into a hip hop sucks show, even though it does now.
But can I give you one example, though, just since we're on the subject?
Sure.
Yeah, the one that I always loved that when it dawned on me the first time is when I heard a rapper say C-Sci for punks, and I didn't know the 5% language at the time. And when I finally figured out he was spelling out the word cop, C-O-P, I was like, oh my God, it's the police. He's talking about the cops. It's like, just when you make those realizations as you're listening to hip hop, and it changes everything that you heard before that point, because then every song you listen to, you're like, he's spelling it out. He's using the 5% mathematics to spell out the word. Just like Riz always used to say, lega head. Allah.
Allah, yeah. Allah. Yeah, Allah. Yeah, the 5%ers were big into the scene back then. They refer to each other as God and things like that. It's
the gods in the earth. I actually made Capadonna laugh out loud when I interviewed him, because I was like, I hate to cut it short, but I got to get back to my old earth. And he just started busting out laughing at this white guy referring to his woman as his old earth.
You just popped me in that. And that, how long ago was that? Now, were you in the cab and he was driving?
Oh. No. This was an interview at a place in Lincoln, Nebraska, because there was a tour called the Black Cloud Tour. It was like Block McCloud and Capadonna were on this tour.
That's great. The old earth. Well, no, it's just, I agree. I'm not going to turn this into a rap sucks nowadays thing, but maybe I'm turning into that old man get off my lawn, but
oh, come on, bitch about mumble mouth rappers. You want to.
I just don't like the style. But again, another thing too is the guys who we grew up with, they all kind of like got married and had kids, and or they're old now, so we can't believe them when they talk about breaking into homes and robbing people and having gang banging fights. We can't even believe that anymore, you know. So somebody like Nas,
but some people have actually made the transition, like Cool G Rap. He can actually get away with it because he can talk about being the godfather of shit and everybody copying what he did. So he can tell stories, and he's just basically saying, here's some more ideas for y'all to copy because I know you copy everything I do.
Well, everybody copied him, including Biggie. Nobody wants to talk about that, but Biggie jacked his flow, yo. But the thing is,
even Big Pun acknowledged it. Like, he got that before Big Pun died. He got down and kissed Cool G Rap's ring, and it's like, I got it all from you.
Yeah, no, and he's a real pioneer. But what I agree though. Some guys like Nas, like I really love the song Nas did, "Daughters." That's like a very mature, and then also "Red Wine" with Amy Winehouse. Cherry Wine, I'm sorry. That was like that. I love when the rappers are now acknowledging that, you know, that stuff's behind me now, I'm a family man. But still, like, I feel like the talent back then, like, we literally were in an era where every week you had like an album that's now referred to as a classic. Every era you had something that was either a classic or close to it coming out for like a 4-year stretch there.
And there was a point where you could go to the record store and buy 12-inch records every single week, and there was always a banger. There was always something with DJ Premier or Pete Rock or Alchemist and some rapper you'd never heard of, and it would be the most amazing track you'd ever heard every single week.
It's like, I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I still bump those old records. And I'm not going to sit here and trash like the kids nowadays. I'm just not into it. I still would rather, I think the Roots might be the only band that, or the only rap group that you can even call them that I think is still from that era, keeping that same lyrical style. I think Black Thought to this day is
one of the most underrated of all time.
Maybe the most, because nobody ever put them on a list, bro. And I'm sorry, look, people love Lil Wayne. Black Thought could wrap circles around Lil Wayne. I'm sorry, but I can prove this. I have an entire catalog of albums to prove it, and I like Wayne.
As somebody who's typed up their lyrics, let me just say it this way. Lil Wayne is a storyteller, but Black Thought is a lyricist. Black Thought actually thinks about the way words sound together and uses that to his advantage. He creates music with the words that he chooses.
Yeah, it's just incredible stuff. So, okay, back to you. So you graduated, and then did you start the website right after? Like, did you get a job? Like, what happened after you left college? Like, what was
which
the first
website though? OHHLA or RapReviews? Where are we?
Well, either one. Like, the picture I'm trying to paint here is you get your degree in journalism. What's next for you? That's the picture I'm trying to paint.
Well, I'll start with the fact that OHHLA got too big for the server I was on at Iowa State, so I had to start paying for my own web hosting, which was a radical concept at the time. I mean, everybody knows about web hosting now because there's a GoDaddy commercial on every TV show, but back then it was like, oh shit, I gotta pay to have a website. So I had a domain name, and I got a web host, and then I graduated from college, and I'm like, now what do I do? Now how do I pay for this every month now that I'm no longer a college student and can't just finance everything with student loans?
Right.
So I had to figure out what to do. And at that point, I got approached by a shady individual. That's the only way I can describe him. This is the same guy.
Was it Suge Knight?
He was the Suge Knight of the web world. I would call it that, because this is the same guy who tried to steal the Boondocks from Aaron Magruder. And I don't even want to use his name, but you could probably figure out who I'm talking about if you look that up, because Aaron Magruder called me on the phone and said, don't sign a deal with this guy. He's a shady individual. And I was like, I know what you're saying, but I need the money because I can't pay for the web hosting myself. And then he tried to steal my entire website. I should have known better. Aaron told me at the time, and I didn't listen to him. So I had to get a lawyer. And I had moved to Michigan just for work. Like, I needed to do a work study to complete my degree, and I ended up working for my sister because that's where she lived. And once I completed that work study, I was just trying by any means necessary, to quote KRS One, to make a hustle out of it, and it wasn't clicking at the time, and I was in danger of losing my website, and I was thousands of dollars in debt. I mean, it couldn't have been any worse for me than it was. I was literally scraping the bottom of the barrel down to my last dollar. I reached a point where I had $2 left in my name, and I went to the store and I bought a lottery ticket and a 40-ounce bottle. I was like, that's it. I get drunk.
Not Life's a Bitch from Nas and AZ?
Yeah, this life's a bitch and then you die. I was at that point in 99. It was like, I'm down to my last $2. I'm getting a 40 and a lottery ticket. And I didn't win the lottery, and I drank the 40 and I pitched it out the back window of my apartment. I'm like, that's it. Whatever happens is whatever happens from this point.
So, okay. Well, before we go any further, I have a couple questions here. One, I like how, it's not really a question, but I like how you said, you quoting KRS-One. That was Malcolm X originally, remember? Then he took that
That's
from...
True.
Right,
but
right.
To me, it was KRS-One growing up because that's what I knew it from. So.
Right, no, me too. Like, I didn't learn that till after. And then, two, so how did you... Okay, I have to ask you about this website being stolen, the thing. So he just jacked all your files, and then you had to get a lawyer. How did you pay for this lawyer?
I had to take a cash advance on my credit card. That's how I ended up thousands of dollars in debt, because I was paying my rent on my credit card. I was paying the lawyer on my credit card. I had no other choice. I wasn't making any money, so I had to take a cash advance just to get what I could get.
Kids out there, try your best not to put yourself in debt. I'm not saying that what you did was wrong. You were screwed, but I mean, it's the best to avoid that. So, okay, now we're in the dark ages. You're in debt. You are broke, according to what you're saying, but you did get your website back, correct?
Yeah, I finally made enough fuss through the lawyer that this shady individual realized if he went to court, he was going to lose. So I produced, through my web registrar of record at the time, a copy of my driver's license and a copy of my original registration of the domain name, and they gave the control of the site back to me. But he still had all of the content that I had created, even though I had the domain name back. So he tried to start his own site called Hip Hop Archives, and nobody went to that site because thankfully Google still had OHHLA indexed, so all the traffic went back to me immediately once I got the domain name back. And then I finally signed the deal that broke me through. I linked up with an advertiser who would work directly through me without this shady individual as the middleman, because the shady individual was collecting all the money and then he was supposed to pay me $1,000 a month. But once I got him out of the way and dealt directly with the advertiser, they sent me my first check and it was like $2,000. I'm like, all right, this is nice. I can pay my rent. I can make a payment on my credit card. And then they sent me the next one and it was like $5,000. And I was like, whoa.
Wait, the next month?
Yeah, it went from 2 to 5 in a month.
And this now this would have been in, just to when we get my head, 1999, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 99, yeah.
So the
B-Boy Document 99, you know. I was INDEPNDNT at the time. I was doing it all myself.
Okay.
So,
well, here's the, before, because I'm going to pause for just a second. So the .com business went belly up in 2000 or was 2001?
it was in the early 2000s, right after Y2K, that it all went, like, the bubble burst. But because I was an established domain name, I was like top 500 or top 1,000 on the internet at the time, I managed to ride out the crash and come out on the other side.
I was going to actually ask you about that. I was going to ask you if the crash had affected your business, because when you start making these $5,000 checks, right, at this point it's like, all right, how long is this going to last? That's the first thing I would be thinking, like, how long is this going to last? Was that what you were thinking, like, or were you just thinking, okay, I got to get more content. I need more lyrics. I need to get the new albums right away and write them up. Like, is that kind of what was going through your head? Like, at that point, when you got that $5,000 check, were you like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for now to get out of debt? Like, what was going through your head when you got that check and after that?
Well, at the time, I had a part-time job doing clerical work for a pharmaceutical company called Park Davis. And when I got that big check, it was coincidentally when I got written up for a workplace incident where I made a joke about being under my desk, plugging a cable into a wall. And one of my coworkers asked me what I was doing under my desk. And I said, don't worry, it's not a Monica Lewinsky thing. And I thought I was being funny. But
Cancel Stevie. Hashtag cancel Stevie.
Cancel culture was for real. And since I was a part-time employee, they cut me loose. And when they cut me loose, I was like, you know what? I just got this $5,000 check. I don't need another part-time job. I'm good.
And that was a lot of money back then. I mean, it still is a lot of money if you're broke, but back then, $5,000 is worth more than it is now.
Right. And then the checks just started getting bigger after that. And then I linked up with Rockstar Games because I was one of the top 500, 1,000, whatever it was at the time. And they knew that I had a traffic that was perfect for their games. So, like Midnight Club.
I remember those ads. I remember
they
them
were taking
vividly.
out ads every month on my website, and I was just banking huge off that. I paid off my student loans, I paid off my credit cards, and I moved from Michigan to Nebraska to move in with my now wife. You know, everything just, I went from the bottom of the bottom to the top of the top. It turned around just that quick.
That it's within, would you say it was 6 months, 3 months, just approximately?
Yeah. The worst thing that happened to me in that 3 months' time was I got a check so big my bank wouldn't cash it.
That's the greatest story. You never told me this story.
This one is hilarious because I had been signing the checks.
Can I ask you how big the check was? Are you willing to say it on the air?
It was a $10,000 check.
Oh, okay.
It was like 10, 5, 36, and 73 cents.
Well, and they wouldn't cash it?
No, here's what happened.
Or deposit.
I had been the checks had been coming to my business name, which I had established a DBA as Flash Web Design exclusive, and they wouldn't cash it because it was made out to my business and I had endorsed it and I didn't have a business account. So they sent my check from the bank to a central routing office in Chicago, and I had to wait 2 weeks to get the check back. And by then I had filed a banking business account with my local bank. But until I got that check back, I couldn't deposit it.
That's just absurd. So, all right, well, that's good news then. So, okay, you started getting these checks, and before we talk about your move to Nebraska and all that, how many checks was it before you said, okay, I'm going to do this full time and I'm going to ride this as long as possible?
I think it was that $5,000 check. When I got that one, I was like, that's it, because I don't need to go back to working part-time. I don't need to do temp work. I don't need to work at a fast food place. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of those jobs. Please do not misunderstand me when I say that.
I get in trouble sometimes when I say burger flipper. Look, I was a burger flipper, but I didn't want to do that the rest of my life.
Exactly. You know, it's like you do what you have to do to get by, but if you got dreams and you want to do other things, it's just a means to an end. And that's all those... those jobs were just a means to an end of getting to where I was.
And you don't have to say this, but I'll say it, and it might sound rude, but it's the truth. I mean, as a businessman, it's a dead-end job. I mean, you're not gonna you might get promoted, you're not gonna be able to buy a house, like you did. So okay. You start collecting these checks. So real quick. So the Rockstar Games thing was direct ad placement on your website. That wasn't through it wasn't through like an agency. They directly contacted you and put ads on your site. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, this is before
I had
GTA.
a personal contact at Rockstar Games who emailed me every month.
Do you still talk to those people?
No, unfortunately, when the
they're pretty big.
When the whole Genius thing came around and I lost all the traffic, I stopped hearing from them. They, not saying it was shady in any way, they just no longer needed me at that point.
I understand it's a business. It's business. It's not personal. But I actually vividly remember the Midnight Club ad. See, it's funny because when we met in 2008, I told you that when you told me that you were Flash, I didn't know that. First of all, I thought that I told your wife this. I thought Flash was like this South American guy. Like I don't know where the rumor started that you were some dude in like Argentina or something like that. I don't remember.
But that's because the internet was so anonymous in the 90s when I came along that anybody could paint any picture of me they liked because there weren't any pictures on the internet. So
exactly.
people thought I was African American, people thought I was South American, people thought I was Asian, people thought everything.
Right. And then when I met you, I was surprised that the AngryMarks guy had been the same guy. I didn't know you were the same guy. It all kind of. Then it was kind of like a culture shock for me because I went to OHHLA in high school. I told you that when I met you. In 10th grade, I used to go to OHHLA because that's really when, which would have been 2000, right when you started making your real money. So I did put money in your pocket through the school computer.
But you know what? The funny thing is, and I will maintain this to this very day, there were never advertisements on the lyrics themselves.
And if you had done that, God knows how much money you could have cleaned up with.
Maybe, but I also felt like it was protection. Like, I am not charging people for these lyrics. There is no
Right.
advertising on the lyrics. That way I can't say I'm making money on the lyrics. I'm making money on the people coming through the website to get to the lyrics, but not on the lyrics
You were worried
themselves.
about Eazy-E's estate coming after you or some shit, like something like
Well,
that.
who knows? Because lyric websites were getting shut down every single day back then. So I was being very careful. In fact, I got a formal letter from the Broadcasters Music, whatever BMI stands for. I forget now. They're like ASCAP, but they're not ASCAP. They're the other group that like licenses and collects royalties and mechanicals.
Right.
So what I found out was they didn't even care about the lyrics. I thought they were coming after me for the lyrics. They were coming after me for the 30-second audio clips that I had in the top 30 on the website. So I had to remove all of the audio
Oh.
clips, and I had to like give them a one-time $2,500 licensing fee and then promise that I would never use audio clips on OHHLA ever again. So I thought they were going to shut me down for the lyrics, and that was all they wanted, and then they left.
So Rap Reviews would have been just an extension of OHHLA. That was right around the same time, right? That was like a little bit after.
That was okay. This is where I started to realize the gravy train couldn't last forever, because I was collecting those big checks, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And my thoughts at the time were, I've got to diversify, because if something happens to OHHLA and that's all I've got, if I get shut down for lyric infringement of copyright, before DME, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, before that was even a thing, right?
Right.
Before people were worried about that, I was like, okay, if I get shut down, what else am I going to do? So that's when I started Rap Reviews. Like, I've been writing reviews since the early 90s, since the Hardcore newsletter. I'm going to compile all these reviews in one place, and I'm going to be the OHHLA of reviewing rap albums, like the most all in one place.
Yeah, before Pitchfork, E-Pinions was very young at the time. Wasn't really what you were. You were just all rap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was going to be as hyper focused on rap music reviews as I was on rap music lyrics. And then after I diversified to that point, I decided to diversify again, because I had friends who were watching wrestling and they were all angry. I was like, well, we're Marks, but we're angry, so we're the AngryMarks. And that was the original name of the website before we just shortened it to angrymarks.com, because it's like, okay, now I've got a third brand, because if something happens to the first two brands, I can still cover pro wrestling. So,
but did you not also triple your workload?
Yeah, and my wife was not happy.
Oh, I can understand that. Trust me, I can understand that one. So, but she understood that. Okay, actually, I want to ask about that. So, you moved to Nebraska and you bought a home. Why did you
not right away? First, we lived in an apartment until we saved up enough money.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you: is why did you choose Nebraska and not Iowa or Michigan or anywhere else you had been? Why Nebraska of all places?
Well, quite frankly, she wasn't going to move to Michigan, because her parents, her grandparents, her cousins, her uncles, all her relatives all lived in Nebraska. And all I had in Michigan was my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nephews. And it's like, I hate to say you guys are going to lose, but she's got a lot more family there than I've got family here. So I'm packing my bags and I'm heading to Nebraska.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And then you found, now the home that you purchased, you're still in that house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bought it in, 2005, I think? 4, 5, somewhere around then.
Really? For some reason, I had the idea that you bought it in like 98, or no, not 98, I'm sorry, like 2001.
No, we were living in an apartment for a couple of years before we bought the home.
But by 2005, were you still getting those big checks?
They weren't as big at that point. They were like maybe 5 to 7, maybe 6, but I was also getting Rockstar money, which kind of helped.
Well, I was gonna say you were still making a good living. You were definitely making over 6 figures a year, but you weren't spending it. You were just saving it up and banking it. You're right, bro. Our lives are very similar. You were banking it until the right time came. Did you pay the house off cash right away, or did you get a mortgage?
No, we got a mortgage, and it was like, whatever, 2.9, 3.9%, whatever the fixed rate was.
Oh, mine was 4.5.
Yeah, well, no, bank rates were pretty good at the time, because the the housing market wasn't super strong like it is now. They can strong arm people into paying whatever rate they want, but back then it was kind of soft. So we got a really good rate and financed, and then I paid it off a few years into the mortgage. I was like, nope, here's my present to my wife for Valentine's Day or our anniversary or whatever day it was. Yeah, I handed her the deed to the house, and I'm like, honey, I paid it off. It's ours.
Wait, excuse me. How long did it take for you to pay off the house? Like, how many years was it? Or was it just a few months? Like, how did you...
No, it wasn't a few months. I think it was probably like 4 or 5 years. You'd have to ask her, but...
Yeah, but that's still better than 30 years.
Oh, hell yeah. And at the time, like you said, I was just banking all that money I was making because I wasn't spending... I mean, like, if I made $10,000 in a month, I might have spent $1,000. And now thinking about spending $1,000 in a month is like totally insane to me. But when you're making $10,000 and you're banking almost all of it, spending $1,000 ain't so bad.
Oh boy, welcome to I know it. But you know what's trippy about that is go ahead, finish your story.
I just want to give you a side note though, because the funny thing is that the things that I've always been passionate about and that I still am to this day are computers and video games and hip hop. And I already had all the hip hop albums I wanted. And I already had a computer, so what did I start doing with that extra money? That $1,000 a month? I was buying old school retro video games, and all those games that people now pay like thousands of dollars for, I was getting for like $5 or $10 a pop back then.
I was gonna say, man, it's almost like you're not really a psychic, but you seem to have. Life has been good to you in many ways, you know, when it comes to like being ahead of the curve on a lot of things. Because you're right, the retro game market really blew up. In the mid to late 2000s, and it's still riding hard, like even to this day. You know, there's Retron systems and all these like hack machines, and yeah, it's crazy. And you were kind of capitalizing on that, you know, early. For what's interesting about the whole house thing is I did something very similar to you. Is I was doing YouTube, you know, just a couple years ago, and I was banking all my money just like you. And I'm not afraid to talk about it on here. So I was saving up for retirement because I had like a Roth IRA and things like that. I had some investment accounts, but I had like $300,000 liquid in my money market account. And that's when I decided, okay, I need to just buy a house. Cause I was just like,
I'm sorry to laugh, but I have to interrupt because my wife's friend, Angie, her husband, Jeff, prepared taxes for a living. She'd been best friends with Angie since high school. And so when we started making over 6 figures, like you said, she was like, you need to talk to my best friend's husband because he prepares taxes. Right. And he looked at the numbers and he looked at how much liquid he had. And he used those exact words. He's like, Steve, you make too much money, buy a house. That was exactly what he said.
Right. And like the thing was, you know what it was for me was, I'm just sitting here. I said it was a lot. I'm just sitting here, right? Like at my desk at the time. I have a different desk now, and I'm just like in front of my computer. This is the summer of 2008, I'm sorry, 2018. That's it. 2018. And I'm just like, okay, like, do I want to pay rent the rest of my life? That was my whole thing because I was paying $830 in rent, which is actually low, because I actually tried to move out of where I lived, and the places that I was moving to were like $1,200. The reason why it was so cheap is because I was grandfathered in from, you know, so many years earlier. And I was like, do I really want to pay rent the rest of my life? So I did what you did, and I started house hunting. Didn't think I was going to find anything, and I did find a house I wanted. So I did like you, where I took out a 30-year mortgage, but I paid it off in like 9 months. And it was crazy how I paid it off because I had the money. So I took a mortgage out, but I had the money to actually pay off the entire house. But I didn't do it right away because I was worried about the future. I wasn't sure how my channel was going to do. I wasn't sure if I had to go get it. I'm very like scared of, because I've been homeless, and I don't know if you know this or not. We've probably never talked about this, you and I, but when I went homeless, it actually caused, well, I know we didn't talk about it now because I didn't get diagnosed until last year, 2 years ago. I got PTSD. I actually got PTSD from that. And since then, the reason why I work so hard is because I don't ever want to be broke again. So in my head, the only cure for this PTSD is to buy a house. So I just remember looking at my house payments, right? This is actually last summer around June. And I had about like maybe 60 grand left to pay on it. No, 50 grand. and I'm looking at how much is being taken out of interest, and I'm like, fuck this, and I just paid the whole thing off. I was like, because it wasn't a lot of money. It was like $300 a month, but I'm like, dude, I could be using that money for investments. I could be buying stuff. I could be, why am I giving the bank these $300 a month if I've already got the money in the bank to pay them off? So I said, fuck it, and I paid it off because, and some people would look at me and say that was dumb. You could have invested it, got more of a return back. Yeah, that's true, but my PTSD kicked in, and my peace of mind is like, okay, now all I have to do is pay property tax and homeowners insurance, and we're good. And so with you, I guess it would be the same thing where when it got paid off, you don't have to worry about rent anymore. Now it's just, the only problem people don't understand, bro, is the repairs. I remember when a tree fell on your house. Remember that story with the tree?
Yeah, well, thankfully the insurance covered 99% of it, but yeah, it was still like $15,000 for removing the tree and repairing the foundation and rebuilding the back patio, and it was just a complete mess. So if I didn't have homeowners insurance, it would have been a huge amount of money out of pocket, but they covered it. Like, we got 50% up front, and then they gave us the other 50 when the repairs were done. So yeah, if you have to pay for repairs yourself, it's going to be a nightmare. But I'll call it not PTSD per se, but being a kid who grew up in rural central Iowa, it was not exactly living the lavish life. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, some years for Christmas, I didn't get toys, I got clothes. So
well, that's all of us, man. We're talking about that's everybody.
I know, but when you have that feeling of never having had anything and suddenly you have a whole lot, you're suspicious of it because you're like, this could fall apart. I could get clothes for Christmas. You have that in the back of your head. You never know when it could end. So yeah, you get reluctant to make the big leap because you don't know what the future is going to bring. And at some point, I hate to say it, you just have to say fuck it and do it. You have to take that chance or pay off the house or do whatever it is to get over that mental block and just know that things are going to be okay. Even if they're not, you have to believe that they're going to be. You have to trust in yourself.
No, and exactly. I agree with you on that completely because it was like I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and then just one day, okay, let me just pay this off because then that way I am now debt free, and I am. To this day, I'm now completely debt free, and the whole key to building wealth is to be debt free. I'm still working, obviously, as are you. I'm not going to retire when I'm not retiring when I'm 40. I don't think I will because I love what I do too much to retire. But who knows? We change a lot as the years go by, and maybe you'll find us something different to do. So okay, back to your story. So you paid off the house. At this point, things are good. Then you said the check started to fall off. When did you were getting less money, but you were still making a living doing this, and then you have AngryMarks as like your third branded website, and then in 2008. Now, okay, when I had met you in 2008, were you still getting the big checks, or by that time were they just okay? Were they just all right?
They were okay. Because the house was paid off and because we didn't have any debt, even just okay, like a few $1,000s a month.
That's great.
Was enough to, it was still great because we were debt free. So it's like, okay, we can go to WrestleMania. We can meet all these people from Wrestling Observer. We can hang out and drink and have a good time because we ain't got no debt. So we can go and enjoy ourselves.
Didn't you go to Puerto Rico for your wedding anniversary, or maybe was it Puerto Rico or was it the Bahamas? It
was the Bahamas,
That's
and actually. It was my wife's half brother that was getting married, so it was like a honeymoon and like a destination wedding. Like, we went with them, but we also celebrated for ourselves at the same time.
Right. And again, that's all because you're debt free. And so even when you're debt free, even like $2,000 a month is still like, you can live off of that. Like you can comfortably, you might not be able to go out. You might not be able to go to fancy restaurants at Brazilian steakhouses every weekend, but you can still live off of it. So anything above that, I feel, is good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in Nebraska, it's not really that expensive to live there, right? Like it's not like LA or New York, right? Things are pretty cheap there.
I would have said that 10 years ago, but nowadays the home market is ridiculous because there's a vast shortage of available homes compared to the people who want to buy them. So the cost of rent and the cost of home ownership has skyrocketed. The property taxes are thousands of dollars a year now compared to back then. So I wouldn't say it's probably cheaper than LA or New York. I mean, it's not even comparable.
Right.
It's not like, okay, I'll just say this, and no offense to people who live there, North Dakota. Like, it's going to cost you nothing to live in North Dakota.
There's nothing there.
There's no demand. But in Nebraska, because we're in a booming metropolitan area with a very high demand for real estate, it's not cheap. It's cheaper, but it's not cheap.
And North Dakota is kind of like the Eric Bischoff. You know how he goes to like Fargo, North Dakota, and like Cody, Wyoming. He's always talking about these rural places that people ride horses in, like, you know, like it's like Eric Bischoff land. So okay, you were still doing okay, and then now I want to talk about, you know, a little bit of when the dip happened, because we said we were going to talk about it here. When Genius. So are you basically saying on here that Genius is they're the ones that kind of fucked you? Like, is that fair to say?
If I didn't say it, other people would, and other people have.
Okay, so at that point, when did you decide to, like, how did the whole thing, okay, because during this time, I don't think you and I were speaking, or we were, and I never asked you because it was a personal thing. All right, what was the story of essentially those checks stopping and you getting the gig at MMA Mania? Like, what happened there is what I'm trying to get the story of. I actually don't know.
Okay, this all goes back to meeting Dave Meltzer for the first time in Las Vegas, because I took my friend Chris, who I've known since high school, to Las Vegas just to get away for a while, because he had just broken up with his girlfriend and he was really in the dumps, and I was still making some decent coin. I was like, bro, I'll pay for your ticket to UFC. I'll pay for our hotel room. I'll pay for your airfare. We're going. You need a guy's night out. So we went to UFC 74. The main event was Randy Couture and Gabriel Gonzaga. And that weekend, I met Dave Meltzer in person for the first time. And after that, I was like, this is my next thing now. I want to write about MMA for Dave, because I was seriously into UFC and mixed martial arts at that point in my life. Because
that was hot back then, though, man. That was a hot period for UFC.
Absolutely. And pro wrestling, no offense to WWE and TNA, it just wasn't doing it for me right then.
Right.
So Ring of Honor was like the only wrestling that I was hardcore into at that point, and that was because of Bryan Danielson.
We were there, man. We went to those shows in Orlando.
Exactly, and it was just an amazing time with Danielson and McGinnis and the Briscoes and all those guys doing crazy things. So it was great for that, but it was not so great for the rest of pro wrestling at that point. It was kind of in the doldrums. So the indies were where it was at, and MMA was where it was at. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to start writing for Dave. I'm going to get in where I can fit in. I'm going to do anything I can. So I would just straight up email Dave, and I'd be like, I want to cover this UFC show in Minneapolis. And he'd be like, go, here's, contact this person, you'll get credentials. And because it's Dave, I would get the credentials. Like, Wrestling Observer has that kind of clout. So
of course, yeah.
I would get those credentials. I would go to UFC shows in Chicago. I would go to UFC shows in Minneapolis. Wherever there was a UFC show that was in geographical distance, I would be there.
How far would you go? Like, what was the furthest trip?
San Antonio was the furthest I went, but to be honest, that was partially just because I wanted to hang out with Ed.
I understand. I was just curious because, you're in the middle of the country, so you could have gone a lot of different directions.
Right, but we kind of agreed to a limit because my wife was getting a little upset with how much time it was taking up. So she's like, you cannot go to every single show. You have to pick and choose. And I was like, okay, I'll pick ones within a geographical radius of us, so I don't have to fly to all of these. Some of these I can just drive to. So that was what we did, and I got in where I could fit in with Dave and covered what I could cover. And for a few years there, I did the Ultimate Fighter report, where every single week during every season of the Ultimate Fighter, I was like, here's what happened on this week's episode, here's who won, here's who lost, here's the drama in the house. But unfortunately, there was a point when Josh Nason took over as the editor of Wrestling Observer, and he was like, this isn't doing the number of hits that we want, and he was so concerned with traffic. And I wasn't even looking at it from a traffic point. Like, I get his perspective, like, if it doesn't draw, what is it doing on the site? But for me, my perspective was, it's news. People need to know the news.
Not just that, but it's text, and then like you're losing bandwidth off. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Right, but like I said, he had his perspective. I had mine. We had a parting of the ways
I
over
just
that.
I just want to say real quick before we go any further. I was writing for Dave too. I was doing the FIP and FCW reports from here, and I feel like I would have had. I left before because when I went through my homeless thing, I stopped going to these shows. I couldn't afford to, and I stopped writing for Dave. But I feel like had I stayed, I would have had the same problem you did with Josh Nason, because they wouldn't have put up my FCW reports or my FIP reports. It was the same thing. It would have been the same thing. I'm sorry, continue.
No, but at that point, when I stopped working for Dave because Josh and I had a parting of the ways, it was like, once again, here I am trying to figure out what to do, because I'm not making any money with OHHLA anymore, and I'm still paying these web hosting bills. I'm debt-free, but if my wife wasn't working, we'd be in the hole. So I had to figure out what the next step was. And I started soliciting to all the different MMA websites at the time. MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, Bloody Elbow. I put my feelers out there. Like, I've been doing this for a while. You've seen my coverage at Wrestling Observer. You've seen the Strikeforce coverage. You've seen the UFC coverage. You've seen the Ultimate Fighter report.
You had a body of work. Basically.
Yeah, I had a body of work, and I was like...
And a journalism degree.
So I had the reputation, and I had the legitimate credentials, if you want to call them that. So I was like, I can do this for you. Give me a shot. And MMA Mania was the one who finally got back to me and said, we'll start you at $200 a month. And I was like, you know what? I ain't making no money, so $200 a month is a good start, and I've just built it up from there.
Now you're making more than that now. We don't have to go into how much. That's fine.
I'm making much more than that now.
Are you a full-time employee, or are you still a contractor? I'm guessing, but are you full time?
I'm still on contract, but I'm getting very close to the point where it's full time, because Bellator alone, covering Bellator, ends up being a full time job because they have so many fucking shows now.
Right. They have little shows, big shows. Yeah, no, and so okay. Now during this time though, here's my kind of thing. During the time when you're kind of in this sort of rocky period where you're not really making any income, you still had money saved up, though. I'm presuming, because you had to pay your electric and your cable and all. You still had money saved up.
Yeah, I had like 10G in the bank and another 20 in savings. So, plus, like you said before about having the Roth IRA, I had the SEP IRA, because when I was making the big bank in the 2000s,
the SEP IRA is great. Yes.
Yeah, and here's the absolutely hilarious thing about that. You're gonna love this tie-in. When I got the SEP IRA, we put all the money into mutual funds and diverse portfolio, and then I bought one and only one stock. I had single individual investment in WWE.
You told me that, because I remember when you got your when you got one of your investor, they mail you stuff.
Right, they would mail me the conference call, quarterly earnings report, and they have a slick glossy.
You know, I bought stock in them too, actually, recently, 2 weeks ago, when it went down. But then it's still going down, so I fucked up. But no, I'm with you, though.
This is why it's funny, though, because I bought it at $13 a share.
Oh,
and I thought
year
it was...
Sorry.
No, what happened was right after that, Chris Benoit killed his entire family. That's not funny, but what's funny is I thought I was going to go broke because I had bought all that WWE at $13 a share, and it plummeted.
Yep. You know, I've been, I don't mean to talk about this publicly, but I don't care. I've been, who fuck it. This is the Geekdom101 podcast. I've been buying marijuana stock, and it's been going down. But I feel it's going to get legalized federally at some point. It might be this year, it might be next year, it might be in 2 years. And when that happens, I could end up being a very wealthy man, because that stock's not going to stay down.
Right, and WWE didn't stay down.
That's
it went
lesson
all the way
here.
Back up. Yeah,
that's the lesson here, is that sometimes you have to eat shit, before it goes back up. But you were smart. No, actually, I have a SEP IRA. I haven't put any money into it yet. I should, but because I have enough in my Roth, and I'm doing a different kind of strategy. But SEP IRAs are great, though. Like, you're not going to hear me argue that. So, but you weren't taking money out of it, though, right? Because you're not supposed to touch that money until you retire.
Yeah, like I got to be 62 and a half or 65 or something,
I think
whatever
it's
it is.
59 and a half. I think it's 59.
Oh, maybe it's 59 and a half. Maybe it's like 62 and a half for Social Security. But yeah,
Yeah,
you can't,
for 63 Social Security. Yeah.
you can't touch it. You got to leave it alone and watch it go up and go down. And that roller coaster can be quite interesting at times because, like right now with WWE going from where it was like $100 a share to now like $42 a share, you feel that. But then you got to know it's going to bounce back at some point, and you just got to ride the wave.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, and that's how it is for me too. Like a lot of my stuff went down. That's how it is. The key thing is you can't freak out and like, have a meltdown over it. It's not for everyone. I mean, because I agree with you. Like mutual funds and ETF funds and whatnot, those are the safest thing to go with. I think that's when you're starting out, that's the best thing to do. And I have a lot of money in mutual funds, so I'm with you. Like I'd rather be safe there than sorry. But once in a while, I mean, let's keep it real, dude. It is legalized gambling. Let's keep it real. That's pretty much what it is.
and how many people listening to us right now are going to be just pissed off and throwing shit at their monitors going, man, listen to these rich fucks talking about their IRAs and their investments.
I'm not rich, though, and neither are you. We're just not poor.
But it's going to sound like a completely different level to certain people. Like, we're definitely not Bill Gates, but we're definitely not poor either.
Right, but we've been there, and and that's the thing is, this is not one of those things where you're right. Hopefully, people will take notes and say, okay, well, if I ever do invest, you're gonna eat shit and you're gonna feast and famine. Hopefully, they will. Hopefully, they won't get offended. So, all right.
You just got to look at long-term trends. You got to not worry about the dips. You got to look at it. If it's a 10-year trend of going up and it goes down in 1 year, it's going to go up later.
Yeah, especially with the older companies like Coca-Cola, Microsoft. They're not going anywhere, bro. They're come on.
Exactly, yeah.
They're good. So, okay, let's talk about, so MMA Mania, that's what you do now. Also, you still host the AngryMarks podcast and Thursday nights, and you still do Glove Up or Shut Up with Peter H, our boy Peter H?
That's correct. We tape a Glove Up or Shut Up that airs every Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 Central, AngryMarks.com. And the Thursday night AMP is taped at 8 p.m. on Thursdays, my time, and it usually gets a replay by like 9:30 or 10 that night. So, yeah, I do the Glove Up with Peter H, and we talk about everything going on in UFC, Bellator, ONE, just anything in the world of mixed martial arts, we cover it. And then Thursday, it's all about pro wrestling because I got a guy who grew up going to ECW shows in Pittsburgh and a guy who is a current professional wrestler, and that's Jason Harland and William Huckabee, respectively. So I get to be the mark, and I get to enjoy pro wrestling, discussing about it with the two of them.
Well, it's funny because throughout the years, there are so many names of people who have been rotating co-hosts on not just the rotating shows, but also the rotating co-hosts on Angry Marks podcast. And by the way, that's angrymarks.com. That's where you can find it at, obviously. But you had, it was Killer Kev, then it was me and Kev, then it was you and me together, then Ciara came in, then you had Nikolai, who was about to have a baby, I think.
He already had a baby.
He already had the baby.
Another on the way. Yeah, he's probably got another by now.
Well, he was always kind of pimping, even when we knew him back in the day.
It is I, the one and only Nikolai. He had such a rap.
There are so many memories of those days. The O Show, Ad on Fridays, Kid Zombie, Rubber Guard Radio, who's still trying to work me 10 years later. He's still trying to work me. David Fuller, him and his wacky.
Yeah.
It's so wacky, though.
Tough Talk, Mike Sawyer and Oliver Kopp, they got their start on Angry Marks.
Yeah, they were on there, and then they moved over to Figure 4, and now they're just doing their own. I don't even know what they're doing anymore. But I do miss that
Mike
show.
has his own website now called Tough Talk MMA.com, I believe.
But I mean, I do miss those days. I remember you had It's Lucha for a while. There was, and then you had, of course, the Chess Army crew, with QCW Radio, and then they came over to Super Friends, and we had such a silly. We were all kids back then. Maybe not you, but Chess Army. I haven't spoken to Chess Army in a few years. He, I have no idea what happened to him. Actually, he literally vanished off the face of the earth. Last time I checked was 2016, and he was really into the Trump movement, and he was really into Donald Trump.
You know who I actually still hear from that crew?
Quintastic one?
No, Denon.
Yeah, he's still bitching about movies.
He got a big argument with me on Twitter about whether or not wrestling journalists could really cover something. I'm like, I have an opinion. It's my Twitter. I can say what I want, whether you agree with it or not.
Well, it's Denon. I mean, Denon's like that. And I remember Fool Killer was like the big TNA guy, and then like TNA, don't even get me started. But he's still around apparently. I found him recently on YouTube, and I remember we were all like fanboying out, like he had like a 2,000 subs. We were all very proud of him. And now I started YouTube. Now, one thing I want to tell you about, let's talk about YouTube for a second, because you have a YouTube channel also. I started YouTube in 2015 with Epitome of Geekdom, and then it became Geekdom101. And what's funny, and a lot of people don't know this story, is you actually asked me to do YouTube before I did YouTube. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, because I was trying to diversify the content on AngryMarks, and I was like, D, you're such an entertainer. You're so charismatic. Do a video, and we'll put it on my YouTube channel. Every week, you can do whatever you want.
I remember that. I remember we had the conversation. It was like 3 in the morning, I think, for me, or 2 in the morning. It was very late at night. It was in my old job that I had when I was in an old IT job that I don't like. I don't ever want to go back to that. But anyways, and I remember, I think I told you, I was like, nah, I don't really want to do that right now. I don't know anything about YouTube. I just wasn't really ready. And then in 2015, I started it. Really, I started it to recruit people for what the website was, Super Friends Universe at the time, because I remember I woke up one day and I looked at my website at Super Friends Universe, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, this sucks. Like, I just had I had a complete meltdown, because we started the website in 2010, not to compete with you, even though people thought we were competing with you. That was not the case, even though the Chess Army had come over, and that was actually about it. Nobody else came over. And we did do like a podcast network type thing. But the problem is that the people that I had gotten, they were good people. And this, you kind of ran into this issue as well, because this is just how it is. People weren't really fully devoted to it. Like, we could do it, but people had full-time jobs. Some of them got married. Some of them got into relationships. Some of them, they just couldn't produce content. They did it for a little while. Like even on your website, you had guys that would come in and do. I remember you had a few guys that I'd never even heard of before. After I left, come in and do like 4 or 5 shows and then dip. Not that they were bad or that you had gotten into a fight with them or anything, but just life gets in the way.
Like perfect example is the late Mike Siciliano, and I hate to say rest in peace to him.
I didn't even know he died.
Yeah, like a year or 2 ago now. But yeah, that's a perfect example. Is he was?
I didn't even know.
Yeah,
I didn't interrupt you.
No, it's all right. It's all right. But he was that kind of guy where he wanted to do something. He dipped in for a little bit, and then his life changed, and he dipped out.
That's crazy. I just went to your site right now because I wanted to look at him, and his bio's still up. That's sad. I mean, yeah, and then you had it's funny because I'm looking at the staff bios, and Contreras still there, which is great. That pops me. King J, no relation to you.
No.
Right. And then of course Frank Vaughn, the sneaker pimp. I remember all these people, bro. But he went to the military, so like it was one of those things where I had that problem where for a time there was like no shows on my site because people had just moved on, and Chess Army kept trying to start a new show, and I remember I looked at my website and I was like, this is not like it didn't look very good. I thought it looked very antiquated. So, and I never told you this story, but I'm just going to tell you, just why not? And then what I did was I redesigned the whole website, and it looked better. I still not really to what I would prefer for it to look now, but it did look better. Then I went to YouTube trying to recruit talent, and I had run into some issues with people who had different ethics than I did when it came to reporting news. And so I just kind of said, you know what, I'll just do it my own damn self. And really, when it comes to me, and I'm not sure if it was the same thing with you, but I feel like there is a little bit of this with you. A lot of it is right place, right time. I feel like if hip-hop had not taken off the way it did in the 90s and sold so many records, there's no way you would be where you were at. Hip-hop getting big is what helped you. For me, had Dragon Ball not come back in 2015, because they were already had a couple movies, but when the series came back, I was already doing content before the series had come back, but when it actually came back, it was a completely like paradigm shift. Like the whole world was flipped upside down, like the Fresh Prince intro. You know, and I feel like right place, right time is important. I really do.
Yeah. You do have to ride that wave when it comes along. If you happen to be in the right place and you're already providing the content people want, just keep providing more because they're going to keep coming back for it. You just ride that wave out.
Yeah, for sure. But, and again, Super, as of this recording right now, we're doing this on February 10th, 2020, has not come back yet, and it will eventually come back because it makes too much money. But right now, I'm kind of in a period where I'm still making money. I'm not making what I would make if Super was back, but I'm still doing a very healthy living. So yeah, I'm still going to produce content. We're not going to stop because there's passion, and I feel like there's
always going to be people interested. Like, what are the voice actors doing now? What are the animators doing now? There's always going to be something to talk about.
Well, there's a new Dragon Quest anime coming out, and you talk about video games. Dragon Quest is my absolute favorite thing ever. Like, I love Dragon Quest more than wrestling, more than rap, more than Dragon Ball. Dragon Quest is like the number one fandom that I love. I have like an emotional connection to it, and they're getting a new anime. So I'm excited for that.
Okay, let me ask you real quick then. Do you have the slime controller?
I have the silver one, but I don't use it. Like when I buy those things, I don't play with them. I like to keep them in the box. You know what I'm saying?
See, you're like me with my Mega Man GameCube controller. It just sits on my shelf looking pretty. I never touch it.
Yeah, there's no point because like you don't want to break it. You don't
want to scuff it up. Yeah, you want to appreciate it. You can't do it.
Right. Now I'm not as hardcore of a collector as you are. I am working on actually building my game room, but that's a totally different topic. It's gonna take some time because I'm trying to save money this year. But the point I'm trying to make is it is right place, right time. But passion is what kind of pulls you through it, and I feel like, and this is not a knock. This is not a knock on our friends or other people who we've worked with. But not all of them had that same passion, like that you and I had, specifically because you kept going. Like you still do AMP, you still do Glove Up or Shut Up, and that's because of passion. It ain't like you're making thousands, unless you are, and I don't know about it.
No, AngryMarks runs at a loss right now.
Right. Well, actually, so does my website, but I'm okay with that because hosting's not that expensive anymore. Not how it used to be, and I don't really put a lot of stuff on my website, so you know what I mean. It's fine. But I actually don't even post on my website anymore. As weird, I have not posted on that website in over 2 years. YouTube is where it's at for me, but it's all about the passion, and I feel like other people. And again, I'm not knocking them. This is not a diss, but like people who have been on AngryMarks or on Super Friends Universe, they only had it for a very short time, and then it kind of like, was this really for them? Like, for example, my friend Rob, I haven't talked to him in a while, but Rob was doing this show called the NFL Touchdown Countdown. I don't even remember the show. It was on my own website. I don't even remember the show's name. And he just kind of quit after a year and just never came back. And you have people who are on your website. By the way, just so you know, on your staff bios, you still have Emerson Whitner as Emerson Whitner, and Emerson Whitner.
Yeah, I know. But we have a problem with that because Killer Kev coded the website, and we can't find the part of the drop-down menu to change his name to her name. So unfortunately, Kev is gone now. He's no longer part of the site, so we don't know how to uncode what he coded for that drop-down.
You can't just call him or is there an issue?
There's multiple issues. It's probably too much to get into, or this might be another hour long. But
no. That's private stuff. We don't have to talk about it. But
but basically, at some point, we'll retool the whole website the way I retooled RapReviews, and now it's got a very nice integrated layout and a really useful search function, and all of the bios are up to date and modern on RapReviews. That will happen with AngryMarks in time, but unfortunately. Apologies to Arya, as she is dead named on the site, but that was going to happen anyway because the internet archived all those articles she ever wrote. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had spotted that. I thought maybe it slipped through your fingers and you didn't.
No, Michelle has made me very aware of that, and Arya is such a sweet person that she never bitches about it. But yeah, I'm aware, and my wife is aware, and she's aware, and there's unfortunately nothing we can do right now. But good that you brought her up, though, because she just wrote an article about the XFL that went live on the website last night. You're probably looking at it right now.
No, actually, I was still on Mike Siciliano's Siciliano's bio. No, I see a WrestleMania 37 thing, LA. Which is that confirmed? Because I heard rumors about that.
Yeah, that came out this morning.
I knew it. I knew it.
Yep.
I knew it. Dude, were you there when I broke the on Twitter when I broke the WrestleMania New Orleans card like 5 months before it went public? That was my because that was my big scoop. Like that was my like big scoop of my career because I had that before Meltzer because I told Double G, I told him I said, tell Meltzer this is the card. I told him Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss, Undertaker, John Cena, all these different things. And I had WrestleMania going to New York for 35. And I broke that on Twitter before anyone, dude. That was that's like my historic scoop forever, bro. That I had like 6 matches from WrestleMania before Big Dave. Nobody before. What's that guy that came around? You know who I'm talking about? He's like the new hot shot wrestling guy.
Sean Ross Sapp, Fightful.
No. The other one. The one that actually.
Ryan Satin.
That's it. Ryan Satin. Yeah, I got it before him.
Mm-hmm.
So, by the way, just real quick, before we're going to wrap it up here in a second, but, well, actually, I'll ask you off the air. I was going to ask you about WrestleMania in Tampa, but we'll talk about that off the air. So, okay, we're going to wrap this up. Now, what advice would you give to, well, first of all, go ahead and plug all your shit. I should have done it at the beginning of the thing. I'll go ahead and record the intro. You have a YouTube channel. You have websites. Go ahead and plug all your stuff, and then we'll wrap up. Go for it.
All right. Well, I guess I should start with MMA Mania then, because that's what pays my bills these days. So if you're into fighting and you're into all the lowdown of what's going on around the fighting world, MMA Mania covers it all. UFC, Bellator, or overseas organizations like One Fighting and independent stuff. You know, it's all there. It's literally MMA Mania, the mania of mixed martial arts. And I usually cover Bellator and interview Bellator fighters, but I'll take assignments on the fly. Like if they need me to cover a UFC fight night some weekend, or and once in a while Premier Fighters League, Professional Fighters League, PFL, I'll do it's passion. It's like what you said before. You got to have the passion for it. So I have the passion for mixed martial arts. So when they ask, unless I've got some other place that I can't get out of being, I'm going to be there for it. So that's the number one spot to look for my stuff. The second spot would probably be MrMegaManFan, youtube.com/MMF187. That's what I'm putting a lot of energy into these days, because I'm trying to develop shows like the Retro Hunting Adventures, where I go out looking for old games and review old games and showcase old games. And then I have sub-series like PC Engine Files, where I talk about obscure PC Engine TurboGrafx games, because that's a console that people don't know a lot about.
Oh, that's old school, yeah.
Yeah, I try to put more information about that out there. And one of my favorites is Genesis Does, which is every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I specifically look at a Sega Genesis or a Mega Drive game that never came out on Nintendo, because that was the slogan in the ads in the 90s. You and I both remember, Genesis does what Nintendo
don't. Yeah, the blast processing. And there's a few of those that I think are still classics. Like there's tons, bro. Actually, that reminds me, I did go see Sonic the Hedgehog. I got to go see it early. I'm guessing you're going to go see it?
Of course.
It's really good. I couldn't believe how good it was. Because, video game movies have historically been terrible. So, Mr. Mega Man Fan, plus RapReviews.com is still up. AngryMarks.com is still up. Is there anything else you want to throw out there?
I think that's probably the most of it. You can follow me on Twitter at MrMegaManFan. It's spelled differently than YouTube. It's MrMegaManFan, but on YouTube it's Mista, Mistah. But MMF187 will get you to the YouTube. Mr. MR will get you to the Twitter. And if you really want to follow my life anywhere else, I'm Facebook.com/OHHLA, and I'm Steve Juon, Juon on Instagram. So that's all the ways you could follow me.
There you go. What I was going to ask you was, actually, before we wrap up, I did want to bring something up here because I'm having flashbacks. I remember when I first started Super Friends Universe, we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And we were doing these NWO skits. We were having all this fun. I was talking about the conspiracy theorists, because I forget who it was. I don't remember where this came from, but somebody had told you, or somebody told me that I was trying to put you out of business or whatever. And basically that was all bullshit. It was all just like, I was pretending to be this NWO, because I was a mark. I still am a mark. And we were doing all these wacky vignettes and things like that on QCW radio. Like, I remember we did a vignette. It's so stupid. It's so childish. It really is. We did a storyline where I purchased QCW radio, and we took the Evangelion, the end of Evangelion trailer, and like edited it. I was editing audio like such bootleg shit, but it was still like, it's training. It's all training for what I do now. I'm just saying,
I hate to interrupt, but it's funny because one of my favorite YouTube channels almost got shut down for using Evangelion.
Yeah, well, copyright on YouTube is, like, you couldn't even do, like, if you wanted to do rap reviews on YouTube, you couldn't even play a clip. You'd have to just talk about the album.
Right, yeah. And there are Needle Drop, like Needle Drop does that, where they just talk about the album and never play anything.
That's all you can do. I think Black Nerd does it too. Yeah, that's all you can do on there. And also it's fucked up because with wrestling, dude, I did a video where I showed 8 seconds of the Royal Rumble 94. WWE claimed it like that. I had to. And
when they claim copyright, they claim the whole damn thing, not just the 8 seconds that you use, but they get all the money from your video.
That's right. And I had to download the video. I had to chop it up. I had to edit it into still footage and re-upload it. Yeah, this is like years ago. Yeah, wrestling and hip hop just don't do well on YouTube when you're using their footage. And I understand why. Anime's up there too. There are ways around it, like, you can flip the image and crop it and things like that, but
is it worth it? You can work it. You can put the thing down, flip it, and reverse it.
That's it. There you go. Or whatever the fuck it was backwards. I don't like Missy Elliott. So okay,
that's what you have to do for YouTube content. You got to flip it and reverse it. That's the only way to get around that sometimes.
It is. No, and you also have to keep it short. So what advice would you give to, like, business advice would you give to anybody who wants to go into business for themselves, as you did and as I did later on? What would be the most important key factor in at least maintaining your peace of mind? I don't even know what I'm asking anymore.
I'll go ahead and answer anyway, because I think if you don't have the passion, which is a word that you've used repeatedly here, and it's a good word for it, you got to have the passion for whatever you're doing, whether it's drawing stuff or writing stuff or making videos or recording podcasts or covering any specific genre, whether it's movies, television, one specific show, one entire series of shows. Like, if you're going to do a Marvel Cinematic Universe thing, you better be the most passionate you can about it, because there's a million other people already covering the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So how are you going to stand out? You got to be passionate about it. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to give 100% of it to what you're doing. And it's not for everybody, because it'll drive you crazy trying to break through, but you've got to have the passion to keep pursuing it. Otherwise, you might as well just have a 9-to-5 job doing menial work, because if you can't commit to it, I'm not saying that you should just settle, but you're going to really bust your balls and you might go broke. But if you're not passionate about it, you're never going to get there.
It's interesting because just to add on what you just said about the 9-to-5, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. There's nothing wrong with having a 9-to-5, but
that's what I mean. It's like, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, especially if you're passionate about it. Like, I know I have friends of mine who are lawyers who they work like 8 to 8 sometimes. They work 12-hour days, but they make good money and they like it. It's not for me, right? I actually like being self-employed because you kind of can work whenever you want. Now, obviously, in your situation, when you have to cover an MMA show, you can't just tell Dana White or Scott Coker to postpone the show because you're sick. And same thing with me. Like, when Dragon Ball Super used to air every Saturday night, I didn't have a social life on Saturday nights. I was covering Super. And then we'd do a stream afterward, and the next day. So that's the thing, is you might have to cut into your personal life, but you have so much more control. Like, there's nothing that feels better, and I think you'll know where I'm going with this, than going to a movie at like 11 a.m. and the movie theater being empty, or going out shopping in the middle of the day when there's nobody in the store. Like, that's what I like, and you can't do that if you have a 9 to 5, you know, and I like that kind of freedom. So it's not even the money that motivates me, dude. It's more so the freedom, you know what I mean? Working a 9 to 5 would suck if I had to go back to that. You know, that's why I'm doing my best to not have to go back to it.
Right. And if I didn't have that creative freedom of running my own business, I wouldn't have been able to start a YouTube channel about retro old school video games, because having that free time and being able to make my own schedule afforded me the opportunity to say, I have a YouTube channel. I see what Big D has done and how successful he's been. Let me get some tips from him on how to do YouTube right. And because of you, now I'm over 1,000 subscribers. It's not huge, but it's like I wouldn't even be at 1,000 if it weren't for your good advice. And it's that passion that I had to do it.
I don't even know what I told you.
I don't
even remember what I said.
You told me to use meta tags and like use them in a way that makes them searchable. You told me to pin comments to the top of the reader section so that if people were looking at the comments, they could go to your channel based on the pinned comment at the top, and you get more subscribers that way. You gave me so many useful tips like that.
All right, don't give them any more tips, all right? I'll give it to you, but I don't want them to be coming around.
Well, you still got to have the passion. It doesn't matter. Right. Even if you hear all these tips, if you don't have the passion, it's not going to go anywhere. You can luck into something. Like, you can have a viral video go 1 million views one time, but what are you going to do after that?
And we know people who that's happened to. And in your case, you're going to collect retro games anyway, so you might as well record yourself doing it. Just say, hey, this is cool. You know, you might as well. It's like Pat the NES punk. Same thing, you know?
Yeah, once you have that passion, then you just run with it. It's like, okay, I'm already doing it anyway. I'm enjoying it. Why don't I share it with people?
Right. So check out Stevie and all his various websites. Whatever you're into, again, the video game stuff's on YouTube. AngryMarks is the wrestling stuff, and MMA. There's MMA on there as well. And RapReviews, of course, if you like hip-hop albums from the last 4 decades, 80s, 90s, 20s, 2010. God, it's crazy that
2020s now, 5 decades of rap.
Well, I mean, it's only been a month, but I see your point. Yeah.
I've been reviewing albums from 2020, and not all of them are very good, but there's been a couple.
Right. But I'm just saying it hasn't been too much, but you're right. I can't believe it's 2020. Go figure. Anyways, thank you again, man, for being here. I really appreciate your time and, you know, telling your story. And maybe in the future we'll talk about video games sometime on here, because, you know, this podcast, I can do whatever the hell I want. It's not what I used to do, but I can curse, and I have to worry about YouTube demonetizing me. I can talk about whatever I want. So, and that's always good to cut loose. Sometimes it's good to cut loose.
You know what? I think these days actually cursing in your videos is better, because then you don't get like, nobody will mistake you for being targeting children under 13, because if you swear up a storm, you're not for kids.
Right. Well, I did do some research on that. When the story was first coming out, even though it's still a developing story, we really don't have anything to worry about unless you actually have a kid in your video. That's I'm not doing that. Like, I have,
or if you're making cartoons that purposefully pretend to be like Dora the Explorer, then you might be in trouble.
Or if it's educational stuff, which again, some people love to do that. It's just can't make money on it anymore, or not as much, you know. But that's all about passion too, you know, really. But all right, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure, D. You know, I'm always available anytime you want to do something like this. You know how to get a hold of me. I'm always happy to do it. I
will. All right. Thank you again. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And check out Steve and all his various ventures, and we'll talk to you next time.